unloaded today, Chris. So if you have a chance to come today between 12 and 1, you can get your stuff out of the bisque kiln, or Monday you can pick it up too.
So I hit record.
Okay. So we're recording, and Jill's going to give us a little intro for the class, and then I'll get started.
We got 1 more minute.
Okay. I see someone, Shao. I think you were at our happy hour last night as well, but I don't know if I've met you. And Stefani and I were texting a little bit this morning. Hi, welcome. We have a nurse in the house. Not sure who it is, but thank you for your work that you do, especially during these times. All right, Jill, do you want to give me an intro?
Hi, everybody. Noon straight up. Welcome. Welcome to virtual ceramics class workshop on luster and decals with Kayla Stein. I'm Jill Valavanis. I'm the Fine Arts Coordinator here at Sonoma Community Center, located in Sonoma, California, 95476. SonomaCommunityCenter.org. Sonoma Community Center is a nonprofit organization, so we rely on memberships, donors, and programming to thrive. Thank you for supporting the Sonoma Community Center and for supporting this artist, Kayla Stein. We'd like to acknowledge the indigenous people, the Miwoks, the Wintuns, the Wapo, and the Miyakmas of the Sonoma County region, whose land we are standing on right now. If you don't know who originally had the land, if you're in the United States, you can text your zip code to this number, and it'll automatically respond with the tribes. The number is 907-312-5085. So for this virtual surface series, we'd like to thank Amico Brent for their support of our 2020 Surface Series workshops. In addition to donating product to our demonstrating artists, they're matching the Sonoma Community Center by supporting a portion of our new equity scholarships. These scholarships provide a reduced workshop registration fee to all those who self-identify as an underrepresented or a marginalized individual. Sonoma Ceramics and the Sonoma Community Center are committed to programming that bolsters the ceramics community through education and accessibility. We began the Equity in Clay initiative in June to promote long-term sustainable change in the ceramics field, and the artists we hire are right there with us. So thank you again to Amico Brent for their support. So just a few little bits and pieces where there are 7 more of this surface series coming up. There are 3 in October, 2 in November, and 2 in December. So a lot of exciting artists who would love to share their skill and their techniques with you. So you could sign up for more by going to www.sonomacommunitycenter.org. And just so you know, we are recording this session today. Within 24 hours, you will receive an email with a link, and that will take you to the recording, and you will have full access to it for at least 2 weeks, so you can watch it as much as you like. So just a little more housekeeping. We'll be taking a little break somewhere in the middle of the session where Kayla is going to switch gears from decals to lusters. And we are going to have all of you on mute for most of the program. but you can ask any questions of Kayla in the chat box, and I will be relaying your questions as best I can to Kayla, and she can answer them. And if we have a little time at the end, we'll have a little Q&A. And if there are any issues with the sound or technical difficulties, please just put it in the chat box, and I'll be paying attention to that, and we'll fix it as soon as we can. And next, here's Kayla to take over from me, and have a great workshop.
Thank you.
Enjoy, everybody.
Thank you, Jill. Okay, that was an awesome intro. I love that you included that text resource. I didn't know about that. If you don't have ability to text through the chat for some reason, feel free to unmute yourself and ask. If you are not able to type or read, you can certainly do that as well to access me. We just like to kind of curate the questions so they land at the right time and I can give you as much information as possible through the demo. So like Jill said, I'll be splitting this into two sections, decals first and then luster. Just decided to go in that order because of the fumes from the luster. So we want to minimize our exposure to that. And I'm going to get into some detail around that as well. I actually haven't taught this workshop before, so I hope it goes well. I hope you get what you need from it. I'm also going to be giving you a file with a bunch of resources that I'll be mentioning in the workshop. So links to companies, places you can order decals, coupon codes, things like that. So if you don't quite catch it in the presentation here, you'll be getting a PDF version of that with the recording a little bit later today. So I wanted to start out with doing a slideshow and show you some of the work that I'm making using decals and luster, and also show you a few artists that I keep my eye on who are using decal and luster in their work. So I'm going to do a slideshow with a screen share here. So bear with me. Okay, so this, am I sharing for everybody? My website, okay. This is just my website. I just wanted to walk you through some things that I've been doing lately. So I'm going to be focusing a lot and showing you the water where series. It's water, W-H-E-R-E. As you know, climate change is impacting our water resources. And I'm originally from Western New York, so there's so many freshwater lakes and springs and rivers, and they never dry up. There's an abundance of water there. So living in California for the past 5 years really has opened my eyes to climate change and regional differences in the environment. So this is what I'm trying to investigate in this work. And by fragmenting the imagery into small pieces and then kind of stitching them back together and firing them onto a fragile material, I'm hoping to touch on the fragility of our current situation. This is the original decal. It's a photograph of Lake Ontario, which is one of the Great Lakes that I grew up close to. And then from there, I cut up the decal haphazardly and then compose the composition onto a fired plate. And these were made in Jingdezhen, China last summer when I was on sabbatical. And I had these decals made there. A benefit of making decals in China is that they have the best technology to be printing with ceramic materials. They're using really high grade material as well. So these, I was so happy with the quality of these, and I made a limited edition run 50 sheets. And so I'll have these to work with for my upcoming show at Red Lodge Clay Center, which will be next summer. And this version of it is a little bit more of a utilitarian version because of the interior is just the glaze, the white glaze. So there's that provides more durability. Decals are a thin layer, overglaze decals, so they will potentially they could potentially scratch off over time. And I'm talking like a long time. So durability is something to keep in mind with these. And I love the back to show the process a little bit as well. I also use luster on this tectonic series. So just isolating some of these small applique pieces that I added on over the slip cast, just to give it more dimension.
Gail, can you describe in more detail the visuals for the sight impaired?
Yes, so the Waterwear series, cobalt blue photographic imagery of water. So very close up photograph showing the texture of gentle waves. And then that picture is cut up into small blocks about the size of a half a stick of gum. And then they're all patched together. So almost quilted together. And there's a little bit of overlap between each piece that creates a darker shadow around each little fragment, as if it's a little bit transparent. So I really think that double layer transparency brings a lot to it. Thank you for asking. So this tectonic series, these are vases with small pieces of porcelain applique on the surface, and the applique pieces are diamond shape and it creates a geometric pattern. And then on top, let's go back here. On top, I will put silver luster or gold luster on top of that, just to give a little bit of sparkle here and there to give more depth to that surface. And then I'll be showing you this as well. This is a stripe, so almost like a resist technique using painter's tape, where I put the tape on the side of the mug and then paint the luster between the tape, peeling off the tape so I get really nice crisp edges, and it gives a linear quality to the form that already has some linear features because of the slip cast parts. So I'm kind of echoing the form in both cases with the luster and bringing attention to the geometry. Something to keep in mind with decals and lusters is that it takes on any surface that's underneath it. So if you put it on a shiny glaze, the luster will be shiny. If you put it on a matte glaze, the luster will be matte, and so forth. So you can put luster on raw clay, but it won't have the shiny surface that you might associate with luster. It'll have more of a matte clay-like sandy surface that just looks like metal. This one is hard to see, but if you note, it's a black vase and there's light gray lines on the black vase edge. This is an iron decal that I made from a laser printer, and then I fired it 1 cone cooler than the glaze. So the iron goes into the glaze and turns dark gray, and it also moves a little bit as the glaze melts. So that's a little bit different. It's called an in-glaze decal, where you melt the glaze enough to accept the oxides into the glaze, and that creates a completely durable surface where the metals are embedded instead of on top. And just a few more images of the mugs with the vertical stripe on them. Okay, and then, oops. I'll be showing you some physical samples of these. I'm not going to do this live, but this is a white dinnerware set that was commissioned, and it also has little applique pieces. It's thrown porcelain with a clear glaze in the applique, and then I will choose little pieces to highlight with the luster to give it more dimension. So it's almost an optical sense of depth with this cube-like pattern. Okay. This one, I just wanted to show you this quickly because lusters also come in colors. It's more rare to see them in color spectrum, but I came across an old box. I think it was donated to the center, an old box of lusters, and there was yellow and pink and blue and purple. And you can see the purple and pink here along with the gold. They're also painted onto the applique with a black background. This is a series of constellation platters I made of the zodiac constellation star maps. And so if you do come across old lusters, they tend to have a very long shelf life. So, you know, buy it from that garage sale or take that donation and experiment a little bit with them. Some of them might have to be fired to different temperatures, but you can experiment with that a little bit. Okay, so that's what I wanted to show you with my work. Let me show you the slideshow now of some artists. Any questions about what you saw with my work? Okay. So just a little bit of background on luster and also some contemporary artists that are using it. If you can see the top of the screen of my preview window, it will say the artist name at the top in case you need the spelling for that.
I'll retype it in the chat.
Okay. So this is Robert Lugo, Philadelphia artist, and you can see his use of luster here and hand painting. Most luster you see will be enhancing the embellishments. It's quite expensive, so it gets used in small amounts typically. And I'm sorry, but the slideshow isn't in order, so I'm going to be going back in time as well. This is William De Morgan. He was the arts and crafts movement artist, and some of the early lusters, I'm talking like really early Persian, Italian, American lusters are done in a reduction kiln. I don't do that kind of luster. I use commercial lusters. They're called, the lusters I use that are available off the shelf are called resonate lusters. And it's because they're metallics that are suspended in a resin. The reduction lusters are the very earliest lusterware, and they're done in a reduction atmosphere, usually with copper or silver, like this one here, and a few more examples I'll be showing you. This is Molly Hatch. She has a wonderful portfolio of wall installations, and you can see her very generous use of luster here. This is a Staffordshire picture from 1815, English. It has like a yellow slip color with silver metallic luster over it with some kind of resist technique showing floral pattern. It's quite exquisite. I think it's very contemporary looking, just gorgeous piece. Julia Galloway, she is a potter and does quite a few luster pieces as well. This piece has a Mishima drawing of chairs, and all around the chairs, there's a field of gold. So kind of filling the negative space with gold. This is Liz Quackenbush. She does Myalica pottery. She does these zoomorphic vessel pieces. And you can see on this example that the underglaze, so that first layer of glaze is not a super shiny glaze. And she's getting a little bit more of a matte or almost like a satiny metallic finish coming from that not so shiny glaze. This is an early Islamic, it looks like a ritual type piece. It's a vase-like shape with two handles on the side, two large handles, almost like wings. And this is on tin glaze. So just like the previous image of Liz Quackenbush, tin glaze is a white opaque glaze to give it a nice white base coat. And then this has the reduction style lusterware over that, probably copper. Oh, and that piece is a really early piece as well. I don't have the date for that, but I want to say around year 1000. This is another Quackenbush piece, and really fun platters with different drawings of shapes scattered throughout the canvas of the plate on the Myalica white glaze, with small details of the luster, kind of highlighting this kind of cosmic soup of images, I'd like to say. This is Tandem Ceramics. They're out of Massachusetts, and they're a production team. They do a lot of dinnerware and vessels. These are their, I think they're called lunar plates, and they're black, satin matte black dinner plates with a series of the moon phases over the black glaze in a gold decal. So this series is interesting. They have the full moon pictured here, but they also cut it down to be the crescent or the half. So it's an interesting way to use a full decal by cutting. And you can see here Tandem Ceramics again, where it shows the cut decals. So you're getting your most for your money out of this. Smart way to use it. This is Joanna Demain, and you'll see her website in the resource list that I'm going to give you. She did an extensive research project on health and safety in using lusterware. Her work is exquisite, very detailed with pattern, almost looking like Australian Aborigine, like polka dot pattern in combination with Victorian scrolling patterns. And you can see on this one, the gold on the face of the cup is over an area that's glossy and matte. So that glossy and matte pattern comes right through the gold field to give you a two-tone effect. Really nice. Oops, wrong direction. This is Molly Hatch again, one of her large installations going from left to right, the blue ground with the copper luster over. And as the grid of plates goes to the right, you end with a solid copper plate. And there's about 12 rows of plates, 12 by 8. This is an early Myalica piece, Italian Myalica, on the, or with the reduction style luster. So you can start to recognize that a little bit, that early lusterware. This is from 1530 to 40-ish. And that copper, reduction luster tends to have a little bit more transparency to it. This is Grayson Perry, artist from the UK, and this is a piece about 9/11 actually, and he's using gold to illuminate the sky, where the sort of the origin of the tragedy, if you will, as the background for this illustration. Pewabic pottery, if you haven't heard of Pewabic pottery, they're in Detroit, Michigan, and it's one of the longest running art pottery manufacturers in the US. And the founder, Mary Chase Perry Stratton, she was sort of put on the map for her luster glazes. And these are the reduction luster glazes as well. And they're still making those today. But you can tell this is a arts and crafts kind of style vase with an iridescent aqua and pinkish glaze. Brian Hopkins, he's a contemporary potter out of Buffalo, New York. And he and I actually have a similar slip casting modular mold process. He does a lot of work with texture embedded into his casts. So this has a wood grain cast right into the porcelain, and then he highlights certain edges with gold luster. Robert Lugo again, and this is another piece of his, a picture where the handle is coated in gold luster, and the top, which is a lid, it looks like a crown, that's also coated in gold luster. Melissa Mancini, Austin, Texas. This is a really wonderful use of commercial decals. So you can certainly buy decals off the shelf. These sort of look like chinoiserie, so Chinese-esque blue and white painting. And she's collaging that all over her cups. And below the decal, so since decals are applied to the already glazed and fired surface, you can imagine these cups without the blue flowers. It would be white cup with a blue grid brushed on, and then that decal is over that. So I really appreciate the dimension that the decals over the patterned glaze provide here. This is Zach Martis, and this is a decal that's made off of a laser printer. So I'll go into this a little bit more in detail, and I have a reference on my resource list for you, but you can make your own decals off of a laser printer. HP is what I've used in the past, and every laser printer black toner has a different recipe, so you do have to test, but they all include iron. Iron and silica are the two most common materials on this planet. So iron is in almost everything that's black or brown, whether it's paint or ink or pencils, colored pencils, it's everywhere. So ink, this iron in the laser toner ink is there for two reasons. One for color, and also one because it's magnetic. So that's part of that laser printing process, is that it's heat fused and somehow magnets are used to get that toner on the paper. So the blacks that create the black toner, they burn out, but the iron stays and fires onto the glaze just like a decal. So I'll be talking about that a little bit. And these are decals you can make at home. The downfall is that they're always the iron color. That's one color. This is Mariko Patterson. She's a Canadian potter, and she makes a ton of decal work. You can see, and also luster on this piece. So she's collaging decals, using colored glazes, using luster as well. And I'll be giving you her website. She also manufactures decals. She has a decal printer, digital printer. And so you'd be able to order from her your own custom decals. This is Wesley Harvey, and he's known for using decals and lusters as well. Has a quite extensive work that speaks about homosexuality. This is Bradley Clem, and he makes his own decals from his drawings. So here you see a growler type form with a cork top and a black and white drawing of a trout. And then I believe it's hand colored with watered down underglazes, perhaps, to give it a painterly effect. This is Justin Rothshank. I'll be giving you his website as well. He's got a lot of great resources on his website, including health and safety and places to purchase decals and decal supplies. He's got a very extensive body of work that incorporates luster and decals. I'll be showing you another image of his work. This is a dinner set here that has a black and white glaze with red poppies on it for a really striking contrast. Jeremy Brooks, he typically uses commercial decals and collages them together to create obscure narratives. So on this plate, there's a baby's behind and legs going into a snowy chimney top, as like Santa Claus would. Kind of ironic. This is Paul Donnelly, and Paul is a potter. He teaches at Kansas City Art Institute, and he works primarily in porcelain and applies subtle decals over his celadon glaze. So here it's a white decal on celadon glaze with a yellow stripe. That's the decal. It's quite subtle, but very stunning and precise. This is another picture of Mariko's work, and I wanted to show this to you. This is just a screenshot of an Instagram post, and her studio is called Forage Studios. But the post says that she should have let these decals dry a little bit longer. So there's an image of a tiger on the rim of this piece, and there's a big white area where the decal appears to be missing or burned out. And that's because there was an air bubble under there, and also that she didn't let it dry overnight. So those are a couple things to keep in mind. Best practices, sometimes you can get away with it, sometimes you can't, just like everything else in ceramics. So I just wanted to show that since she shared it with us. And then, so you do want to let your decals cure for a day if you can. This is Meredith Host, and she has a retro style pattern, highly patterned work, dinnerware set shown here with sort of a stripe pattern overlaid with a pointillism pattern that she gets from paper towels and toilet paper and things like that that sort of have this fake quilted embossing. She's using colored decals here, but also the iron decals again are being used for that pointillism pattern. This is Melissa Mancini. You had seen her cups with the blue decals, the blue floral decals. And this is another line of work that she has. These are earrings, either with black clay or white clay, and then she hand paints the luster stripes on top of them. So very detailed, kind of geometric patterning. Carrie Radash, she uses red clay and opaque glazes for her dinnerware. And then she'll put the iron decals over that, and using them over different colors give different effect. So here she has the iron decal over the pink glaze, also over some orange glaze, and the red clay underneath the white glaze kind of comes through on the edges. So that's a really nice relationship between the decals itself and the clay body and the glaze. Justin Rothshank again with a collaged tea bowls, collaged with floral, looks like a combination photographic decals and drawn floral pattern. Paul Donnelly again with a white decal over the celadon, here with a red stripe. And I think something to pay attention to with his work is that has this very tight geometric pattern that he's getting through the decal. So you know how, working with clay, you know how hard that would be, trying to either carve or paint on color to be so precise. So that's a great way to use decals. And then lastly, Justin Rothshank with a Ruth Bader Ginsburg commemorative plate. So an iron decal of her portrait. So it's a sepia tone portrait look with a commercial decals of birds, like a peacock type birds in the branches and flowering bushes around her. If you notice, something I want to point out with the iron decals, you can do photographic imagery, but it's really important that it's high contrast. So if you're using photographic imagery, you want to play with the exposure, the contrast, and the black and whiteness of it. Because grayscale, it'll come through, but it can make it really unclear if you keep a lot of grayscale in your iron decals. All right, so thank you. That's the end of that. And we can get to work here. So most of, let's see, any questions, I guess, before I get started? Okay. I'm gonna just shut that. So I have, I'm going to be talking about three different kinds of decals today. We have underglaze decals and overglaze decals. There's also in-glaze decals, like I mentioned before. I think to get started, I'll do underglaze decals. We can kind of think of this in terms of the ceramic process. So when would you use underglaze decals? It would be applied to the greenware stage of your piece. So either on a slab that you can then build with, or it can be applied to a piece that's already formed into a shape, and then you just can put it onto the surface. So let me just get my stuff out here. I don't use a lot of underglaze decals in my personal work other than the signature on the bottom. So I'll start with that. Well, actually, no, I'm not going to start with that. I'm going to start with the outside, because the bottom is sort of like a thing that you do at the very end. So I'll just show you what I have to work with here. I had a sponsorship from 2 different underglaze decal companies to share their product with you today. And so this is a company called Elon Transfers, and I'll give you a coupon code for them. It's 5% off, and I'll put that in the resource list. So here's some of their decals. Pink leafy pattern. Some gems, some blue floral, and then black lace. And this is on a rice paper, basically. It's like a thin tissue paper. Not technically sure of what they call it. It might not be tissue paper. This is Sanbao, and Sanbao, they're located in Jingdezhen, China, but you can also order custom decals from both companies. And Sanbao also offers overglaze decals as well, and gold decals. Elon is just under. So here's some of the patterns that Sanbao sent me. So you can see some of the colors are similar. This blue, black, green, red, pink. And these are on a thin paper. Comparatively, I'd say Elon feels a tiny bit thinner, actually. The paper really does make a difference on these, and it may determine how you're applying it, like what it needs to be applied. They have a shelf life, so the older they are, the more difficult it is to get the transfer off. So that's something you want to consider when either purchasing decals or buying them from a yard sale. They might not work as well, so don't get frustrated. It might just be the shelf life. And you want to order in a manageable batch size so you're not storing them for too long. All decals, whether overglaze or underglaze, you want it to be as temperature controlled as possible. So there's not big swings in temperature. I keep all mine in plastic bags, like Ziploc bags or containers, or both, like this one, just to try to preserve them longer. Because if they get damp, they can stick together. So be really careful how you store your decals. Sanbao is also offering a 5% discount on your next purchase, and I'll include that in the resource list as well. So I have some slip cast pieces here that are soft leather hard. And I'll be putting the underglaze decal on the outside and then putting one of my signature stamps on the bottom, or signature decal. So first of all, I want to make sure my piece is really smooth, and I like using the red mud tool rib for that, just to make sure that if there's sponge marks or casting marks, that it's as smooth as possible. And this is, I'll be showing you the traditional way of putting these on. And you can also get really creative with them and put underglaze on your piece first and then the color decal. So it doesn't need to be on white clay. You could have a slip. You could have colored underglaze, you could have red clay, black clay. Images will pop the best when it's contrast. So think, you know, blue on white or a white decal on black clay. So contrast is key. But on the other hand, if you want something a little bit more subtle, you could do black on black or blue on blue and just have a little bit of a shift there. So those are just some different considerations. You can also sgraffito over the decal once you put it on. But an underglaze decal is pretty much underglaze on the paper, and then when you'll see when I put this on, you use moisture to transfer the ink, basically, the underglaze. Some people make their own decals by screen printing onto special paper, and Sandbow does sell that paper as well. So you can certainly do that. And Forrest Middleton, he screen prints onto newsprint and then transfers that onto his throne pieces. He's going to be teaching a surface workshop on December 12th. And his process is pretty cool because he throws a cylinder, makes a basic cylindrical form, puts that on, and then he pushes the form from the inside so it stretches the pattern and twists a little bit as it's spinning on the wheel. So it's a really cool translation of this process. Okay, so let's see. I'm going to do a comparison because I think just sharing a little bit about the products would be a good idea. So we can compare Elon and Sandbow. I'm going to just, so something to consider is if I wrap this flat piece of paper around a form, it's going to kind of twist the decal. So I'm just going to try to block out what I think is up and down. Doesn't matter too much with this, but I'm going to just cut a piece. It's about the size of my cup. Do you have any questions, Jill? Okay. So there is the right side and the wrong side to apply. You want the inky underglaze side to be placed on your surface. I don't think that's big enough. You can kind of detect it, yeah. It's almost like you can feel it a little bit. It's a little bit more embossed feeling, the side that it was printed on. And you can always test that, you know, just there's registration marks here, so you can kind of test it and see what side rubs off on a little extra piece. Okay, so I'm going to just make sure it's a little bit extra big. And then this is really extra big. Always save your scraps for test tiles and things. I'm just going to gently place this on here. And you want to start from the inside and go out. So I'm just going to take my sponge, get it a little bit damp, not dripping wet, just damp, and kind of start in the center here. And gently work from the center outward so that any air bubbles will be pushed out. My thought is that I'll do a different pattern on each panel of this. And it's
so the question is, visually, is the ink side darker? It's hard to see.
It's a little bit darker, yeah. And it'll be easier to tell in person. The ink side's a little bit darker. And really, you can feel a little bit of the raised texture. So start from the center, and I'm just kind of brushing outward with a sponge. If it wrinkles, you can kind of work the wrinkle out before it sticks down. Because once this is stuck on there, you don't really want the decal moving. Check your sponge too to make sure you're not picking up the ink. And if you are, just rinse out your sponge. So I'm going to overshoot my edge here a little bit. Okay. Once it's all the way on there, I'm going to go back with my red rib. Start from the center. And I'm picking up a little bit of the underglaze as I'm doing this. So you want to make sure you clean your tool. So now you can see the difference of the wet slip and the underglazed paper that's not wet. And you really want...
Paper's so delicate that we would ruin it by putting too much pressure or repetition.
Yes, so just go gentle first. But once it's on your piece, it's pretty stuck on there. So the piece itself is kind of holding it. I'm gonna just peel up and see if I'm getting a good transfer. And it looks like I am. Could do a little bit more here. I'm gonna check this side before I peel it too. Do a little bit more. Okay, that looks pretty good. So no wrinkles, no air bubbles. I embossed it a couple of times, checked it, and then you can slowly peel it back. And if you can see it, pretty much all of the underglaze is on the piece. I'm seeing a little bit on the paper here lifting, which means I could probably, just that one little spot I missed. There's a spot on the bottom. So I'm going to just lay that back down and give it a little bit more pressure there. So you can kind of like just keep dibs on what's happening, and you can certainly lay that back down. And this is, like I said, the traditional way of like really getting all that underglaze off and onto your piece, but you may not want that. If you want a more distressed look or aged look, you could do it much lighter or make it wrinkly, something like that. Let's see. Just gonna clean up. So if you overshoot like I did, you can actually just wipe it off because it is underglaze. So I'm just cleaning that up to have a nice intersection for my next piece of different colored decal. I'm gonna cut off an extra little piece here. I like this decal. It's a nice product. I'm gonna cut and use this extra piece to mask my next intersection here. So I'll stick that on. So then when I put my next piece on, it will be a nice crisp intersection.
Here's a question. Can you fire decals on your bottom if it is underglaze without it sticking to the shelf?
Yeah, absolutely. My signature thing, my name signature that I'll show you is on the bottom. You might get a little bit of flexing if they add a little flux to their underglaze, but I think for the most part you'd be totally fine, especially with a finer design, linear design. If it was like completely all color, you might have a little bit of sticking just because there is some flux in that decal. Especially if you're firing a little bit hotter. But that also goes for just regular underglaze too. You can fire that on the bottom in a lot of cases. Not every case, but most cases. All right, I'm gonna do the red. Now some colors, you know, red is a hard color to get in ceramics, especially if you're doing high fire. So you may want to make test tiles of these too. Test. if,
If you totally mess up applying the decal, can you wipe it off and start over?
yeah, I would recommend scraping it off with a thin metal rib first, just to get what you can off, and then sponge it. Maybe it's too wet to apply the next decal right away, but you could set it aside and let it kind of get to the point where you can apply it again, because you don't want it sopping wet. You don't want your piece too wet. You know, you want to be able to handle it in a way where you can, where it's not going to deform, and you don't want it to be soaking wet. So this was in my damp box. I have a plaster damp box that I keep a lot of my stuff in, my mugs and handles. So this was in my damp box since I taught my mold making class in August. And it was, the magic about a damp box is it keeps things wet for a very, very long time, forever pretty much. So I would probably just put it back in my damp box if I had to wipe it off. But you saw me wipe off the one edge here to make it a clean edge. This one I didn't do yet. I'm going to wait until I get over here. Okay, so I have my, oh shoot, it went in the water. I'll have to get a different piece. My resist piece to resist. So my resist piece is just to resist and make this a really nice crisp line. You can do patterning with resist pieces, like you could put masking tape on this or stickers. It's not going to be picking up the underglaze that's already on there, but I can just lay it over the edge of the underglaze so this line remains crisp.
You talk a little about making your own damp box.
Yeah, so pottery plaster #1 is what you want, and that's available from your pottery supplier. And a damp box is just a Tupperware bin with plaster in it. So you want to have about an inch at least of plaster in the bottom and a tight fitting lid. And you can mix your plaster, pour it in the box, and then it's ready to go. It's ready to use in an hour because you don't have to let the plaster cure. You actually want the wetness from the initial mix of the plaster to always stay in there. And it just creates a floor in the damp box of wet plaster, and that's what keeps it wet in there. So it's sort of a micro atmosphere. If you can't put a bone dry piece in there and expect it to turn the leather hard. I don't think. I haven't tried that before. But you can put a piece that might be too stiff to put a handle on. You could spritz that with water, put it right in there, and in about 24 hours or 12 hours, it would be much more leather hard all the way through again. So it's a really great way to like homogenize handles and cups to get it to the right consistency to attach. I have a special, it's like this size actually, handle damp box just for handles. So I can fit like 20 handles in there. And then I have like a mug damp box, and then I have a taller one for taller pieces. So it's a game changer. You know, I'm the director of the ceramics program here, and I don't have as much time in my studio as I wish because I'm doing programming and classes and everything. So that really allows me to like just do small amounts in the studio and not lose pieces to drying. Total game changer. Or if you make small pieces, jewelry, things like that, that could be a really helpful studio piece.
Can underglaze decals be layered one on top of
Yes, definitely. Okay, I think this one's ready. Am I in the center of the screen?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
How often do you need to add water to a damp box?
That depends on how wet you want your pieces to be in there. So if it's not keeping them wet enough, you can totally reactivate, like it will never die, if you will, because you can re-wet it to the point of when you first initially mixed it. You just put a ton of water in there, so there's standing water on top of the plaster slab. Let that sit overnight. If there's still standing water, sponge it off. But that would give it total saturation. And then if you wanted a little bit drier from there, you know, you can leave the lid off for a little bit. I tend to add water to my damp box maybe like once or twice a year, but I don't use it that much. So I'm not opening and closing it all the time. It would depend on how much you're using it, what climate you live in and stuff, but it's super easy to rehydrate 100%. All right, this is really crisp, really nice. I have my resist here and it worked really well. So that gives like a really clean intersection. So graphic. So let's try a sandbow. And I'm pretty sure that these will be compatible with each other because the recipes for underglazes are so stable and generally a similar recipe. So someone asked about how can you tell the top and the bottom. In this case, it is much darker on the ink side than the non-ink side. So just imagine, here's the non-ink side, and then here's the ink side. And if you want to just test it, you can, you know, get your finger wet and see if it rubs off a little bit. You'll get a hang of it quite easily. This one has more of a directional pattern, so I'm going to just pay attention to that.
Here's a question. How long does it take decals to dry? Resist. Describe the difference.
How long well, to dry on here, it's already dry because it's kind of just like, it's almost just like stamped on there. Very, very thin layer. So as if you were just painting underglaze, it's going to dry really quickly because it's such a thin layer, and the water actually gets carried away with the paper. So the dampness is just embedding it into the surface. Resist. Guess I didn't understand that part about the question, about the resist. I'm going to clean my...
Sashi wants to know, Kayla mentioned shelf life for these decals. Any rough time? Understand it depends on the environment.
Yeah, they say like 1 to 2 years. Keep in mind that you might, when you're ordering them, you might not be getting them freshly made. They might have already been stored a few months. So that's just something to keep in mind. They'll just release from the paper a little bit more difficultly. So it's not that you can't use them, it's just you might have a little bit more frustration getting that ink off and onto your piece. Same with overglaze decals. Sometimes they stick together and they just don't come off. And you'll know if they're not usable because it just won't work. Right here, this is where the ink went over the line that I wanted. So I'm gonna just clean that off. And this is how I would clean off if I totally messed up a piece. I would scrape this away, and you can kind of see it being removed right now. Scrape it away to get most of the color off, and then I'm just gonna clean it up with a sponge a little bit. I'm gonna go back over with the rib, and then I'll put my next decal on that.
What are you doing wrong when the transfer bleeds?
Too much water, or your piece is too wet, or both, or too much rubbing. So it just means you're overdoing it in some way. Oops, I didn't want to put this on yet. I wanted to put the resist. I'm going to resist both sides now because I just have this one area to cover. Sometimes black I found bleeds easier. But yeah, just a little too overzealous. You can put decals on bisqueware. It's a little bit more challenging because the bisqueware is so porous and thirsty that as soon as you put this paper on and get it wet, it's just sucking the water. So it's a little bit more, it's just a little bit more frustrating to me. Plus, if you then glaze it, if you're brushing glaze on, it could smudge the decal transfer because it's not bisque fired onto the piece. So you have to be really careful of that. I also find when I put my signature decals on the bottom, if I can still smudge it after the bisque if I try. So I always put wax over it to protect it. So that's just something, and different companies, again, they have different recipes. So that could have just been the company that I used for those. But just be careful handling your pieces that have decals on them after the bisque. Maybe test a little area to see if it's smudgy or not.
Do you get similar transfer quality in porcelain and stoneware?
That's a good question. Because porcelain is so smooth, you're going to get a better transfer on a smoother surface. And also because it's white, you're going to see the contrast of the ink better, but you can still transfer onto stoneware. I just recommend that if you want a really crisp transfer, to use your rubber rib or make sure it's really smooth. However, it could look really cool to have, you know, this tight pattern on top of a crusty, groggy stoneware. And I feel like that's something really interesting to play with. So it doesn't look, you know, so controlled or so commercial in that way, but it could really bring something interesting to the work, depending what aesthetic you're going for.
What kind of porcelain do you use, and are decals made for specific clay bodies?
I use a bunch of different clays, just depending on my project. This is slip casting porcelain that I made. It's cone 5-6, and it's pretty white. It's from my friends at 2-1 Ceramics. They have a slip casting production company in Vermont. But decals really are just made as image transfer. They're not made for specific clay. Okay, so I have my 2 resists, and I'm going to do my green sandbow decal. Something I didn't mention before is I've been lining up the bottoms just so there's a nice edge there. This paper seems a little bit thicker, so we'll see if that acts differently around the curve. If you have tighter curves, you're going to run into a little bit more challenge of getting your decal on there. So I'm just kind of lightly getting it down, and then I'm going to go back over with my rib. Elon decals and sandbow, I believe. Actually, I haven't seen sandbows, but Elon has a bunch of free video tutorials on their website that you can download.
You know, you can have custom underglaze patterns printed through those companies?
Yes, both companies. Both companies. I haven't done a price comparison. A lot of companies, so the way they print these, they do screen print them onto the paper. So there's always a setup fee or a minimum order when you're ordering custom, because they're having to make a silk screen just for your pattern. And then usually there's a minimum order of pieces or money. So it might be, you know, $300 minimum order. It might be 75 pieces, something like that. And then usually the more you order, your price, you get a better price break. So for my signature decals, because they're so tiny, we actually went in with a bunch of artists and everyone made tiny signature decals, and we just did black, and it ended up being super affordable. But if you're doing full sheets, you know, this is a typical full sheet size. I think it's 17 by 23-ish. The Sandbow ones, I think they just sent me small samples, but usually it's this size sheet.
Do you have to worry about copyright issues for patents and non-commercial use?
Yeah, I wouldn't totally steal someone's design. You can appropriate and alter. But the companies that are printing, they leave that up to you, up to your discretion, because they won't do the research to see if it's copyrighted. So definitely you want to come up, you know, with some of your own imagery or alter imagery, collage. So if you had multiple copyrighted images and you collage them together after the decals are printed, I don't think that would be copyright infringement. But I always recommend that somehow you make it your own, whatever that means, if it's coloring it differently or changing the design, adding to it, subtracting from it. Okay, so we're ready to peel here. This looks really nice. I would say that these two products are really comparable. Got a really nice transfer there. And then here's my resist piece. You don't have to use the edges of this. You could really use anything to resist, even newsprint or paper towel. So there's that. The underglaze decals will look different depending on what glaze you put over them too. So you could, it might be obvious, but if you want your decals to show up, put a transparent glaze over it. Don't put an opaque glaze, because the opaque glaze will cover it. But you could put Celadon or any kind of transparent colored glaze, clear. You might get a little bit of a different color change, and that could be really interesting. You could also color in, like for instance on this surface, it's like a palm leaf with peaches. So you could go back in and color this in with a peach underglaze, or after it's bisqued, you know, color that in with a glaze. So there's some options there to like bring even more depth to this surface, kind of like what I was doing on those tectonic vases where I had pattern and then I had applique and then I had luster. So you can think about building surfaces that way. I had also mentioned that you can carve through, and that would be another good way to bring texture into a decal piece after the decal is applied. If you have a textured piece already, it's going to be hard to put the decal on that because you want full surface contact to get the image transfer. You need that bonding surface to surface. Okay.
So once you peel the paper off, the foundation paper that was carrying the ink, and you compare the two different companies, one looks more clean, like all the ink came off.
Yeah, well, so here's the comparison. It's about the same. I think the green just is darker, so it's showing there. The transfer looks like it all came off when I look at my piece. Here's the red, maybe because it's the darker pigment. The pink really looks very, very clean, but the pigment's so light. I think that's why that seems to be a little bit different. Whereas if I do a black one, it might look even more pronounced. Okay. I'm just going to put the signature piece on here. Let's see, it's 11:10. Put the signature piece on, and then I'm going to take a break and move to, or no, then I have to do overglaze decals. Okay, so I just want to show you this set of signature decals that I had made. I learned the hard way. This dark one with the light white lines as my name, it doesn't work because the lines are so fine and there's always a little bit of smudging. So the smudge just totally interrupts those really fine lines. This is what really works well. The black line, the clean black line on the white background, or nothing background rather. It's just the black ink. So I wouldn't recommend doing super dense fine line patterns like this, because you're going to run into some problems. You need to really have that contrast and a thicker line than that for success. Okay, so my little name signature, I already did the red rib here. I'm just going to place this. I used to sign my work with just the letter K originally, and then along the way someone brought it to my attention that, well, no one would know who exactly made it if it's just a K. You have to put your whole name on there. So I started doing that.
You use the same size signature for every size?
I have a couple sizes. Yeah, this is my smallest one and it's good for cups. And then I have a little bit bigger one. Let's see. I thought I brought a finished cup with a signature. I'll show you in a minute. I think I have one somewhere. I do, but it just looks like this. This is the size I use for my cup, and I have like a little bit bigger size, about 2/3 bigger for the other things, but I kind of like it as small as possible with still being legible. So at this point, it's finished. Of course, like I said, you go back in and underglaze it, carve it, put different colors, different underglazes over it by hand or by decal. But at this point, it could just be ready to bisque after it dries. All right, so I'm gonna move on to overglaze decals if there aren't any more questions about this. If you're thinking about doing a custom underglaze decal, I would really recommend ordering samples from the company that you're considering buying from for color, but also just, you know, to get a sense of their product. And both Sanbao and Elon were really awesome and like sent them to me the day I asked to show you guys in this workshop. So far, I would definitely recommend both of them based on their product and also their customer service. Okay, so next I want to talk about overglaze decals. So it is what it sounds like. You would apply them to pieces that are already glaze fired. So you can buy commercial pieces and fire decals onto those, like blanks. You can make your own pieces, fire the glaze. It can be cone 04, it can be 5, 10, anything, as long as it has a surface it can adhere to.
One more question. What is the range of underglaze colors they support?
I personally don't know. I think each company might be a little bit different. Red, blue, green, black are the typical ones. Yellow. They might even do custom colors for you if you're looking. That would be so cool. They can also screen print more than one color on a sheet. So again, each screen is a different or each color is a different screen. So they would be charging you per screen or per color for the setup. And then if they do that, you may also have the flexibility to like get just one color and then get some that are two color. So there's a lot of possibility with that as well. Or they could combine the colors for you on the decal, but you could have two separate patterns with two separate colors. Once the screen is burned, then there's a lot more flexibility. But there's a lot of cost in making a screen. I've done some underglaze and direct screen printing onto slabs where I've just taken a design and taken a screen that I purchased to like a t-shirt making shop, and sometimes they'll burn it for you. And usually under $30 to burn a screen. And so that's kind of a cool option too. If you really want to be DIY with it, Sandbow sells their decal paper blank, and then you could also try on rice paper or newsprint. Some people just do it on newsprint too. So lots of possibilities there. But yeah, it's pretty affordable to burn a screen, and then you can also use ink on it too and make t-shirts that are the same design. Okay, so underglaze decals. If you have any questions too, we can always backtrack, but I'm just going to move on to the overglaze. So I mentioned the waterware series. This is the fired plate with the decal. And when I ordered these, I had the photograph that I took and I doubled it up for the full sheet. So this is a full sheet. And I had just done the, the blending of the images in Photoshop. So it's a full sheet of the water pattern with the horizon. And when I use it, I can use the darker area here, or I can use medium, or off in the distance, the pattern is tighter. So these are just different parts that I use. Here's the version of that with a patchwork. And then here it is with the gold. And this is not really a traditional way to use a decal. Typically, you're going to see decals around the edges like I did with the more functional version of that plate, where it's just on the rim. And that's because with the overglaze decals, as I mentioned, it's a thin layer of pigment on top of the glaze. It's fired in there, but it's so thin that eventually it could wear off. I haven't used these enough to know, but I wouldn't recommend eating off of the solid like this because it's probably going to wear off. If you don't want it to wear off and you want it to be durable enough for everyday use or restaurant wear, you'd want to do an in-glaze decal, and that actually goes into the glaze permanently. So it's really under the glaze surface and it's super durable. That's what I did for these. I mean, it's really hard to tell unless you can feel it. But this is a commission that I did of shards. So someone brought a box of shards to me and said, can you please make these into functional plates? And I couldn't use the shards to make the functional plates, but I took photographs of the shards and then had an in-glaze decal made of it. So this is a cone 6 clay body frost, and they're hand-thrown plates. Sorry, that was probably really loud. So hand-thrown plates with the glaze fired, then the decals on it, and then I fired again to like cone 5. So I do a 1 cone cooler, and this goes right into the glaze. I can't feel it at all. It's totally embedded, but it's not fired too hot where it actually distorts the image. So it's maintaining the integrity of the image, but the pigments are really like in the glaze at that point. These are a little bit more expensive. These are screen printed as well using the ceramic pigments. And there was like a 75 sheet minimum, I believe, for this. So it's like $750. And the sheets are the same size. This was ceramic, let me see, Art Decal Enterprises, and they're in Long Beach, California. They have an awesome product. They also do decals for glass. I believe they do overglaze decals too, but they were really great to work with. And I feel like this is the first time I had done in-glaze decals. So I was really happy with the results. And these were made for a restaurant in town here in Sonoma called Edge. And so they use them as their dinnerware. Sorry. Other thing I had made in China when I did the waterware is just gold, solid gold sheets. So luster, as you will find out soon, it's not that friendly to work with because of the organic compounds that are in it. So instead of always masking up and setting up my studio for lustering, I wanted to get sheets because I was doing linear patterning anyway. So this is just solid gold on a water slide decal sheet. And that's what I used for these, for the block, quilted blocks. And it's also what I'm using for these cups now with the vertical lines.
Will you be giving all the details of these resources in your notes?
Yes, yeah, I have links to all the companies for you. And every company I'm listing, I have worked with on some level, even if it's just getting free samples. So they're coming recommended. Okay. So, you know, it's pretty straightforward in terms of applying decals.
Will you also be able to provide some recipes for screen printing decals?
I don't have any recipes for that, but Forrest will be. Could you get me a clean water? Excuse me for a minute. Just clean, yeah. Just had to get some clean water. With decals and lusters, it's really, really important to have a clean, clay-free, dust-free workspace and surface that you're going to be applying onto. So I use rubbing alcohol. I clean my piece first, and then I use rubbing alcohol to extra clean it, because I want to make sure there's no oil from my hands, no dust. Thank you. Nothing. So don't put lotion on your hands before you go to the studio to luster or decal. I usually wash my hands and then rubbing alcohol. I've heard some people use white vinegar. Keep it super clean. I also like to have like a little sheet of foam that I can put my decals that are ready to apply. So hold on a second. Here's my piece. Okay, so I'm gonna be, I didn't have plates to put on the bigger decals, but I'm gonna be showing you the gold line, which is the same way I do all my decals. So they're all water slide decals. If you can show the overhead here. So this, can you see that the glaze itself has microcrystals in it? And the gold luster is picking up the pattern of the crystal, which is matte, in the glaze underneath. So I'm really into that. I love that about this glaze and about the luster, how it picks that up. So I'm going to be putting it on this surface, which is also microcrystal, and just be doing lines on there. Pretty straightforward. So all of the decals are water slide decals, meaning they slide off in water. So I'm going to soak it in the water, cut it to my shape, soak it in the water. If you're doing a, maybe I will do a form and just put it on a plate, or I'll do one of these. If you're doing a shaped piece, you want to cut pretty close to your form. So you can have a little bit of an outline, but You want to be pretty close, because you may see a little bit of an edge if there's a little bit of glaze melt. So I'll put this onto a different plate. The cool thing about decals too is you can take them off if you mess up. So this one's already fired. I'm just going to put this on here to show you, like going over a contour, how that will look. But I'm not going to fire it again because it's already finished.
2 questions. Are waterslide decals okay for outdoors or will they fade?
No, they're still archival for color. Yep.
And then the other question is, are the gold sheets available for purchase?
You might have to order them. I should be selling them actually, but I don't know that I have enough. I will let you know. I'll think about it. I'll do inventory and I might sell them, because I'm a little bit, I ordered a bunch, but then I was like, well, what if they go bad? What if I don't use them in 1 to 2 years and they go bad? That would be tragic. So maybe, maybe I should sell them. Sandbow makes gold decals as well. So you can have custom gold decals through Sandbow. I believe they also sell image gold decals, so like arrows, feathers, leaves, flowers, things like that. So check out their website. Another supplier of those gold decals is the Ceramic Shop out of Philadelphia. And they usually have really good prices on things, so check them out. Okay, so I'm just going to put this up here so you can see. The water slide decals get saturated pretty quickly, and you don't want them to stretch too much. So I just check it by holding the paper and the decal between my finger and moving it a little, sliding it, see if it's loose. And if it's ready, I'll put it off to the side on this foam sheet so that they don't float off of the paper, because they will float off of the paper and then it'll be very hard to get it because it's such a thin layer. If you're quick or not doing a bunch, that part's not necessary. It's just a little tip. Okay, so I'm going to be highlighting right along the edge of my form where it's already, I already have a vertical line and I want the decal to wrap over the top. So I'm going to extend it. And then I use a clean paper towel or rag to make sure that's on there. And I'm wrapping it into the inside as well.
Linwood says that luster decals are also available through Milestone Decals.
Cool, Milestone Decals. You know, that might be the company I was looking at on the Ceramic Shop's website. So very similarly to the underglaze decals, you don't want to have any air bubbles under your decal. So you kind of smooth it out, make sure it's placed where you want. And when I'm adhering it with my paper towel, I'm also getting out all of the extra water and air bubbles. So like smoothing it from the inside out. Really important, because you'll get that blank spot where there's no decal if there's an air bubble under there. So the next one goes on, and you can, if you're trying to move it on your piece, you can wet your finger and just put a little water on there and it'll make it more slippery to place it. So full contact. This would be difficult to also, the decal or the gold decals would be difficult to put over texture. Any decal is hard to put over texture because it's sheet goods. So that's when you would want to be brushing it on instead.
What's the difference between in-glaze decals and overglaze decals?
So just what it sounds like, in-glaze decals are fired into the glaze, 1 cone cooler or so than the glaze itself. And then because it's fired into the glaze, it's also much more durable because it's in the glaze, not sitting on the surface. So it's more durable, fired hotter. Color retention might not be quite as good as an overglaze because overglaze decals are fired much cooler. So you want to experiment with that. That's why I went with the Art Decal Enterprises in-glaze decal for those edge dinner plates, the shard dinner plates, because their reds and pinks would sustain the cone 6 firing. If I had done an overglaze decal at that temperature, it would have burned out and it wouldn't be durable enough for restaurant wear. So that's why I used it for that one. And it was also a commission, so I had the money to invest in buying those in-glaze decals. Okay, so this is, I'm not gonna go all the way around. I would add more, so like about every one had a gold bar all the way around. But for the sake of time, I think we should move on. But this is just how you apply an overglaze decal. And we can do this plate one next. So I'll just soak it in the water. While that's getting wet, I want to mention the iron decals. I used to make these like folk tiles, and these are slip casted frames with iron-based glaze rubbed on and rubbed off, and then I have the iron-based decal on the inside in the frame to kind of show images of old life or folk images. And the reason I use the red iron-based glaze is so that it would relate to that decal color, that default color of the iron decal. And I'm not going to go into that too much today, but the Justin Rothshank website that I'll include on the resource list, he goes into the overglaze iron decals quite extensively in terms of printer types, toner types, and paper types. But you're essentially buying the paper that's pre-coated, and then you print on that and then transfer it. So it's still a water slide, and it's just based off of that toner from the laser printer. So pretty accessible, but just the iron color is the only color you're gonna get.
If there are a few questions that you haven't gotten to, can they email them to you?
Sure, yeah. You can email them to Kayla@KaylaStein.com. That's usually better for art stuff, and then I'll keep my community center email for other stuff. Okay, so we have the plate here. Here's the water slide decal. So if you have a weird shape, you can actually slide it off like this, using the paper as a support, and get it into place. And then starting from the inside and going out, I'm going to be getting out the air bubbles in the water. If you have a more serious curve to go around, you can soak your decal in warm water, and it will help stretch the plastic. And it's that plastic surface that helps carry the ink onto the piece, but then it burns off in the firing. So when you fire decals, because there's that off-gassing of the plastic burning off, you really want to make sure that your kiln space is well ventilated, that you're not working in there when you're firing this. You should be doing that anyway during any firing, but there is some extra smell that will come when this plastic burns off, like around 500 probably. So you can also just check and see that there's no air bubbles. If you do have a little air bubble, like right in the middle of your decal, you can, if you can't get it out by squeegeeing it to the side, you can poke it with a pin, and then that air bubble, you know, push down, so there is no air bubble there, so there's no pocket. So you can poke it that way. Okay, so that's the water slide decal. It's very direct. I think that it's intuitive on some levels. And I would say like you could just experiment with some to get started if you're interested. You can find them on eBay, like you can find the more vintagey ones on eBay too. So you don't have to like come up with your own design, but if you want to play with commercial decals, they're totally available. Okay, so I think here's a couple examples of, here's an iron decal over a glaze. This is made by Kathy Solomon, who's a member here at the center. So you can see there's a little bit of difference in the tone of the iron depending on what glaze it's on. That's just something to keep in mind too. Just wanted to show you those. All right, so I think we'll just take a maybe not even 5 minutes. I just need to switch around stuff here. So I will be right back. Okay, I'm back. Can everyone see me? Hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Great.
Thank you, Donna.
All right, so I just want to jump into luster. We might go a couple minutes over. Show you some examples first here. This is Jason Walker, and he is an amazing artist. He does porcelain sculpture. He makes some pots, Jason Walker, and all of these little hatch marks are luster painted lines. And then the trout and the moths are pushed in from the outside. So he does underglaze painting and then glaze and luster together. And his sculptures are exquisite. Check him out. Just to reiterate the influence of the glaze underneath. So this one is a matte glaze and I brushed on the luster. You can see the brush marks. That matte surface glaze, it's an actual matte glaze has microcrystals in it. So it's grabbing onto the luster in a different way than the shiny. So it's kind of retaining the brush marks a little bit because it doesn't flow, the luster doesn't flow over the glaze. And it also is a much more matte finish. This shiny glaze, shiny gold, is on a shiny glaze and you can see it's super shiny. So you're gonna get the full effect there. So I just wanted to really reiterate that. Same as this one. This one's platinum. So this is another option. Most common options are gold, platinum, copper. There's also mother of pearl and the colors like I mentioned. Health and safety is super, super important for luster because luster has the organic compounds. This is a resonate luster. Any commercial luster that we can get is most likely a resonate luster. And so it's an oil or resin-based luster, and it's for oxidation firing. So electric kilns, well ventilated. I usually leave the top peep out and just do a fast firing to cone 017. That's my firing cycle. I have a scut. I've used many scuts, and that's always the program I use, just their basic fast firing to 017. Any cooler than that, like 018 or 019, it's going to be a little bit softer on the surface. But like the decals, the luster doesn't really have like a super durable surface. Gold is soft anyway, but it's such a thin layer of metallic that it can burn off, or sorry, not burn off, it can rub off if you were to scrub it over and over from hand washing, or if it were on the inside of a handle, it'll wear off over time too. So it's just something to think about. I don't mind that the material shows the wear. I don't have an example of it, but I have a plate like this at home, and it is kind of wearing on the high points of the applique. So it's
What
just,
brand do you like?
I like, well, I've been using Duncan. It's a thinner luster, so I feel like it goes farther. They have gold, and they have premium gold and they have bright gold, and it's the premium gold that's the better gold. The bright gold is a little bit cheaper, but it's yellower, and I like the little bit higher quality. I did get this giant bottle of luster when I was in China last summer, so I'm going to be trying this shortly. So this is like a lifetime supply for me. There's other brands. There's a good German produced luster. I haven't used it, but I've heard it's really good. I think there's good lusters made out of Korea. But what I've been able to find the most in the States is Duncan. So I would start there, but if you do have an opportunity to buy a European luster or Chinese or Korean, Japanese luster, go for it. It's probably a little bit higher quality.
If a piece gets worn, can you re-luster it?
You can, but sometimes weird things happen when you refire pieces that have been used for a while. I've tried that before, and it was on a white piece, and the glaze, the white glaze kind of turned gray. Like I think there were like micro pinholes that somehow got stained or something. So I wouldn't recommend refiring it, but you could do a test. You could refire it immediately. Like if your brushwork wasn't good enough, you could put luster on that and then refire it. But after use, I wouldn't really recommend it.
And can the overglaze decals and luster be fired together in cone 017?
Yep, definitely. I wouldn't pack the kiln super tight because there is a lot of off-gassing with both of the firings, like the plastic burning off from the decal, but also the luster. And the idea with keeping the peephole open at the top is to make sure that the atmosphere in the kiln is as clean as possible. So if you have a kiln with a vent, enviro vent from the bottom, use that kiln, or maybe crack 2 peepholes, one at the bottom, one at the top. And yeah, I don't pack my decal kilns really tight. I try to have like plenty of just loose air in there. So let's see. Yeah, that's what I have about luster. So I use this is a Advantage brand MSA respirator. And this is the vapor cartridge, organic compound vapor cartridge. There's a different cartridge that I use when I mix glaze and mix clay and clean my studio. It's a particulate, P100. So make sure that you have, this is the 4515. Well, actually, this is a particulate and a vapor, but anyway, vapor is what you want because it is that organic compound vapor that's bad for you. It's bad for your skin contact, but it's also bad to breathe. So you want this, and you also want good ventilation in your studio. Some people have a downdraft table. That would be ideal. You can do it outside. If you do it outside or in any studio, have a fan set up either to the side of you so it's blowing the fumes away and out the window, or behind you so it's blowing the fumes away from your face. I like to also, like typically I do it in the spray booth. So I'll sit in the spray booth, have all of my stuff set out right there, turn the spray booth on, and then it's really sucking out all the vapor. And I also don't do it in the studio when we're open, when there's other people walking around without a mask. This is something that I usually do at the end of the day, right before I load the kiln. And as I finish my pieces, I put them in the kiln and fire right away, because they'll even off gas if they're sitting on the table drying overnight or throughout the day. It's very obvious when you smell luster. So I'm very careful about cleaning my brushes, keeping my luster in a separate box. So this is my luster box because I don't like the smell. And then in my luster box, I have another box, And this box keeps my brushes, the essence, which is the brush cleaner, just some tape and sandpaper. Yeah, I just have 2 little bottles left here, but I can smell it right now, just opening this box. And your brushes, you always want to designate a brush just for luster and just keep it for luster. So that's what's in here, my luster brushes and all that. And it doesn't seem to off gas from here. I also use gloves. And then my gloves, my brush, you know, the paper towels I use to clean my brush, I bundle that up and throw it outside in the dumpster that's outside, because the garbage in your garbage can in the studio, that can even start to smell too. So if you smell it, do whatever you can to not smell it, whether that's cleaning or ventilation. I see pictures of people on Instagram like with just a bandana over their face, and that's not good enough. It's so important to have good practices, and especially if you're using this material regularly. So I'm going to add luster bars to the other half of this one and show you my original technique for resisting into the clean line, sort of like straight line. And then I'll do a free form brush luster on this triangle cup. And I'll just show you now that this is the underglaze decal signature base, you know, underglaze transfer for my name on the bottom there. So that's what that looks like at the end. I don't typically put luster on these, but for the demo I will. So to get the straight line, I use the cutting mat and painter's tape. I found that using scissors did not create a crisp enough edge. And then the edge of the tape from your tape roll bouncing around, that edge is not good enough either.
How do you splatter luster?
Oh, I don't know if I would splatter luster. You could just do dots, like this plate. Can you see that in the detail? I have little sort of stellar star-like dots, and I just did little dots with my brush. But you could splatter it like you would do with anything else, like flick your brush or something like that, put it on a toothbrush and then like flick the toothbrush type thing. But just wear gloves if you're doing that, and make sure like it's not going on the wall around you. Just be really careful. So I'm gonna lay out my bars here. And I'm just following the line of the form itself. This is kind of tedious, so like if I were doing a whole set of these, I would probably one day do the taping and the next day do the lustering. The luster is quite liquidy. I always say it's like nail polish. It's sort of gooey, liquidy. If there's too much on there, it's gonna drip, like move after you don't want it to move. So a thinner application is best. And essence, it's called brush cleaner, luster essence. You really want to have that to clean your brushes. And if you mess up, it's the only thing that will clean it off. And trust me, even if it looks like you cleaned it off completely, you didn't, and it will come back when you fire it, like it's a little smudge. So make sure you have the luster essence if you want to end up cleaning your brushes properly or cleaning off any smudges properly. So I'm burnishing the tape onto my glaze with my fingernail to make sure that's a really tight connection there. So this is the part I'm going to luster right in between the tape. And I'll go ahead and put a few more tapes in place, maybe just one more, because there's quite a bit on here already. I'm gonna go crazy and go horizontal. right here. Try something different. I always try to try something different for a demo. It's like a good opportunity, be experimental. And you don't need to do tape resisting or anything like that. You could just go freeform. That's totally fine. Because my work is a lot about geometry and architecture, I like to have the tape as a guide for me to make really crisp lines. Let's get this a little bit tapered here. Luster can also thicken up over time in the bottle. So if you have really, really old luster, you can add like a little drop of essence or have a little essence in your brush. And then it will get thinner for you if you want that. Okay, so I have 2 areas blocked off. I'm going to do that.
Is there a shelf life?
Yes, but it's very long because I think I have some lusters from like the 1950s that are still okay, or maybe 60s. So it seems to last a really long time. I think I'm going to break into this Chinese luster.
Can mother of pearl luster also be fired Decal in 17?
I believe so. This is mother of pearl here. This one's made in Italy. This is called Color Robia, another brand. I don't know because it's not on the jar, but you should look it up to make sure. Look up the brand and the type to make sure, but most lusters are 017. Some might be cooler, especially if they're older. So you could always test it at a lower temperature if you're not sure, and then fire it a little bit hotter. But just go online and check out the brand. Not really sure how this opens. Kind of funny.
So you found it doesn't always say on the side of the bottle what temperature?
It doesn't, yeah. Well, either way, before I make a mess, if I do that, I'm gonna put my mask on and my gloves, and then I don't think I'm gonna talk while I do this. And I'll just be brushing the luster on in a smooth, even coat, fairly thin. I don't need it super thick because the material itself is a little bit transparent. And even if it's a little bit transparent on your piece, it will fire to be fully covered unless you can actually see that an area isn't covered with luster. If it's too thick, like I said, it will run a little bit later when I put it vertically again. But once it dries, it won't run in the kiln. It's not like, there isn't a lot of flux in it that would run like glaze. So once it's on there, if you don't see drips, you're good. All right, so I do recommend getting a respirator. If you don't use one in your studio already, I use this for cleaning too. I really have no idea how to get this off. Go for something different.
I know it's hard to answer questions right now, but a couple, so when you have your respirator back off.
To do yes or no, or can you hear me? Can they hear me?
Oh, someone's lost the screen. Okay.
Can you hear
I can
me?
hear you.
Okay.
Can you see her? Yes.
Okay.
I can hear you.
Okay. Go for
should
it.
the brush be natural fibers or are synthetic okay?
I have used both. I haven't done a side-by-side comparison, but when I was in China, they said the best brush to use is rabbit hair. And when I was reading Joanna, her website, it said her favorite is squirrel hair. But I've been using synthetic. So I would say try it. I'm also going to do a little free form here. As I said I was going to, I forgot, with silver. This is actually white gold. There's nothing in there. Okay. I will use mother of pearl. And I will test it to see. So yeah, try, different brushes. Brush definitely makes a difference. Don't use anything too stiff. If it is synthetic, I use something like this. If it's synthetic, I'll show you. Like this. Can you do a detail?
All right.
So I use something like this if it's synthetic, soft. I would say try, depends what kind of marks you want to make.
Do you need to shake up the bottle?
It doesn't, no, I don't usually shake it. Doesn't seem like it. So this is mother of pearl. It's really light colored. I don't know if you can even see what I'm doing.
Can you hold it lower?
I'm going to do triangles on this one.
Do you have to clean the piece off right before you apply the luster? And what do you use?
I usually use rubbing alcohol. Yes. You have to clean it. You don't want any dust. You don't want anything on there. No oil from your hands. So don't handle your work unless you just washed your hands.
And do you see brush marks while you're applying? And do you ever apply multiple coats?
I never apply multiple coats, and yes, you can kind of see the brush marks a little bit. As long as it looks, even if it's a thin coat, as long as it's covered, it's usually okay.
And with the cleaning with alcohol, do you just spray the piece down or do you take a paper towel and wipe it?
I wipe it. The other reason I have luster only brushes is so it never has clay dust in them. Because your brushes could be carriers of clay dust and that would leave marks on the luster.
Does luster ever need dilution?
Yes, if it's old and thick, you can add the essence to it.
Will we get to see these fired pieces?
I was just thinking about that.
Huh.
Sure. I wonder what the best way to do that is. I'm going to put them on Instagram. Is everyone on Instagram that you can follow me?
Somebody said no. Is it Kayla Stein?
Kayla Stein Design. And I'll put them on Instagram and then I'll also put them maybe in an email to everybody. But I'd love it if everyone could follow me on Instagram anyway, if you are on there. And if you decide to do this, you could show me also. I'd love to see it. All right. A little bit, one more side of triangles.
Do you fire these to cone 018?
017.
07.
018 is a little bit cooler, and I find that the gold and silver tend to rub off a little bit, or not rub off, but they're much softer. So if you are, and each kiln, one cone isn't that big of a difference in the kiln. So if you find that you're not getting durability that you want with your luster, fire it one cone hotter. Because my cones my cone 017 in my kiln might be your cone 018 or vice versa. Because, you know, they're a little bit off sometimes, or even if you have old elements, something like that.
And do you fire it fast?
Yeah, fast with 2 peeps out if it's full. And I fire it when I'm not in there. Don't fire it when anyone is in the studio. Super important. All right. Little triangles, because it's a triangle cup. I don't think that this is going to show up very well, I'll tell you the truth, because it's gray. Mother of pearl is really just like an opalescent layer. And I just think it's not going to show up that much on the gray, which could be nice that it's subtle.
As long as you're wearing your mask, can you work on the piece for a long period of time?
Yeah, absolutely. I can't smell anything right now. And that's what you want. If you smell it, it might mean your mask isn't fitting you properly. So you can work on a piece as long as you want, yeah.
If you have an enviro vent, do you still need to pull the peeps?
I usually do, yeah. Yeah. It's supposed to like prevent haziness in the luster. It's supposed to give a clearer luster if you don't have the fumes in there. You probably could just do 1 peep on top if you have an enviro vent. Okay, so I have my paper towel. I have my spot that I was opening my stuff. I'm going to shut all this. This is my protocol. I'm going to put my luster pieces out on the windowsill so it doesn't smell. I forgot to show a part.
Do I need essence for each luster, or can the gold and white gold be cleaned in the same luster?
I clean it in the same luster, and I always find that I always run out of luster, or essence, I mean. So I would always have a spare bottle on hand if you're using it a lot. Okay, so I'm going to peel this tape off. So I use a X-Acto scalpel.
When do you know when it's time to remove the tape?
I usually just do it immediately when I'm done with the piece. It doesn't really dry. It stays sticky until it fires. So I don't touch it. I just take it off when I'm done. And like when I'm doing this in the studio, I'll take it off and then put it right in the kiln. And then I'll do my next one, take it off, put it in the kiln. Or if they have more than 1 luster on it, like gold and silver, I'll do all the gold and then all the silver and then take off the tape.
And you can fire them right away?
Yep. Fire them right away. And in my kiln on the fast program for cone 017, it's usually just like a 3 or 4 hour firing. So it's really quick. All right, so I'm gonna go put this in the windowsill. I think you already saw like the nice crisp line here. And it doesn't need to be straight. It could be curvy. You could do other shaped resists also. Okay.
Gold decal sheets, do you know of a company that's not in China?
No. There might be, oh, you know, maybe That place in Long Beach, California, the Art Decal Enterprises, they might do it. Or Milestone, I think Lynn Wood had said Milestone does gold. So I just like to take all of this, fold it up, my glove around it. And it kind of keeps everything sealed up. And I'm just throwing it away. Gross. So it's not too smelly in here, but I really couldn't smell anything through the mask. So make sure your mask fits well too. If you can smell through it, and you can test with other things, you know, ahead of time, make sure you have a good fit. So let's see, what else? Not too far over, sorry about that. Can I answer any questions? We covered a lot to sort of just scratch the surface, but overall, I hope you got a lot out of the class, and especially know best practices now for the luster, and also firing your decals and your luster. And if you want to email me with any questions, it's Kayla, K-A-L-A, at KaylaStein.com. I'll also mention that I believe in November, I'll be offering an intro to mold making class. It's a virtual class with pre-recorded videos and then consultations once a week for 4 weeks. And I ran it in August and it was a really good class. Some of you were in it, but I think I'll be rerunning that, and it's intro to hump molds, slump molds, one-part dropout molds, multi-part molds, and then a little bit about slip casting as well, and carving plaster. So it's a very technical class, but very approachable and perfect for beginners or those with a little bit of experience but who want to really hone in their skills. So I will be sending you the file with the resources and also the recording a little bit later today. And then check out my Instagram for pictures of the pieces, and I'll try to remember to email the class as well. So thanks, everybody.
And there's a flutter of other little questions they can email to you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. Sounds good. Well, are they there now? Yeah. Should I just answer them?
Well, if you want to.
Sure. Why not? We can even have them talk if that's easier.
Oh yeah. If your question was not answered, you can unmute.
Kayla, this is Deborah Pittman. Hi.
Hi, Deborah.
My question is on the signature. Can you do that on the computer with the laser printer?
Yeah, that's a good question, because you would be applying it to the raw clay underneath, right? So it's a little bit more challenging because the decal doesn't want to stick to the porous clay. But if it's porcelain and you sand it with wet, dry sandpaper before you apply it, so after the bisque, it will work. Yep. And that's what I did for those tiles, is I sanded this clay surface so it was as smooth as it possibly could be to then make that signature stick. Okay. I had tried doing that like on my pottery, like doing a lot of multiples, and it was not 100% successful. So you might have some issues. Unless you have a little bit of an area underneath where you can put some glaze, then that would be helpful.
Okay, thank you.
I have to ask a question. Could you do this in a test kiln?
Absolutely, yeah.
Because actually I still work inside of a studio of the Northern Clay area, and I don't think I could just put luster.
No, if you're in a community studio, definitely check with the technician or whoever is running the studio first to see when a good time would be, and also if they can reserve a kiln for you. I mean, it's a really short firing, so the nice thing is you can go in at night and it'll be ready first thing in the morning. and it doesn't take a lot of electricity to fire a kiln that low and that short. So it's not a big, you know, even if you have a couple pieces in the test kiln, it doesn't waste a lot of money.
And I would probably need assistance anyway because I'm sight impaired, and I know that they would probably help me set it up and stuff.
Perfect.
I have a So the only difference between in-glaze decal and the overglaze decal is the temperature you fire it at, right?
Yes.
You apply them both the same way. It's just that the overglaze you fire it at 0.17, and the in-glaze you fire it a cone lower than the glaze.
Yeah, and sometimes you can get away with even going lower than that because some materials and glazes melt sooner than others, so it might adhere and go into the glaze a little bit sooner. So you have to experiment based on the glaze you're using. And then, yeah, some glazes, well, like my blue water decals, I did fire those in glaze as well. I tested that and it worked. The blue changed a little bit though. It got like the tone of the blue, it went a little darker. Like I lost some of the really delicate detail in there because as the glaze melts, it kind of like moves it.
You fired it at cone 5 because normally you fire it at cone 6, right?
You could try it. I would just, you know, you could try it since you're probably doing cone 6 firings anyway, and then you can pull back and fire cooler and cooler and cooler until you find that perfect temperature. And it might work at cone 6 for you. So if it would certainly be more convenient to have it work in the kilns that you're already firing your glazes to, and only go cooler if you need to. So I would recommend doing a little test piece. Definitely, because sometimes it might be a weird temperature like cone 3, and then you have to go to cone 3 for the details.
5, but okay. Thank you. It was a great workshop. Thank you.
Thank you for coming.
Kayla, one more question on the in-glaze. I think it's a new concept to me. So it's also applied on already glaze-fired ware?
Yes.
Okay. So it's not like you're doing this simultaneously with the glaze. Okay.
Yeah, really the in-glaze, it goes into the glaze when that glaze melts again in the second glaze firing, basically. Yeah. Good to see you, Sashi.
Hi, Kayla.
Yeah, hi.
I had a question about the decal that looked black on the black piece that you showed earlier. It was an in-glaze decal.
Yeah.
It doesn't burn the decal image out.
It moved it a little bit and it faded the color. So yeah, it definitely alters it a little bit, like the chemistry of the heat will change it. But no, it didn't burn it out. It just embedded it into the glaze. Yep.
Hi, Kayla.
Hi.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. So I use luster a lot to make my ceramic jewelry. And what I was kind of looking for today, and I don't know if you can see this, is I hand paint a lot of mine on, but because I'm painting so many pieces and it's sort of like a time consuming process, I'm looking for a way to create like a resist that is not tape. Do you have any suggestions?
Have you tried using wax, like your regular?
I haven't. So I don't use wax for any of my glazing, and I never have. But is that like would that be like a good thing to burn off at that temperature?
I would try it. The wax will definitely burn off it before 017. It would be interesting to just test that because it'd be super easy. And then it'll burn off in the kiln. It just depends, like, I don't know if that gold is going to totally disappear or end up on your shelf or something. So, but yeah, that's where I would start, just like with pottery wax, maybe on the thicker side. And then if that doesn't work, yeah, I mean, you have so many pieces, you wouldn't want to like tape every single one.
Yeah.
But you might be able to do something where maybe you have like a big piece, like a thick piece of tape, and you just tape them down and then you take the one whole piece of tape off of like a set of 10 or something.
A set of 10. Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah. I could see that working, like, or contact paper, something really sticky like that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
Or
Thank you.
maybe you continue that gold line to the back, because that could be nice.
Yeah.
It's extra gold and extra work though. I'm very like in tune to efficiency in the studio. So like, you know, I totally get it with what you're doing.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right. If that's it, then we'll wrap it up, and I'll send you the files later. Have a great day, everybody. Thanks for coming.
All right. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Goodbye. Nice meeting everybody.
Nice to meet you too. Take care, everybody.